Lila Bennett sat cross-legged on the frayed carpet of her tiny apartment, the walls thin enough to let in the sound of distant sirens and the bitter wind that scraped against cracked windows, her eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights and silent cries, her heart thudding with the weight of survival. Her infant son Noah lay sleeping in a second-hand crib beside her, a tattered blanket barely shielding his tiny form from the creeping chill that filled the room like a ghost. She looked at the bottle in her hand. 3 ounces of water, a single scoop of formula, the last she had left, her chest tightening with fear as she realized this was it. There was no dinner, no backup plan, no hidden jar of change behind the couch. Her paycheck from the diner had gone to rent, her electricity was one late bill away from shutting down, and the friends who once posted heart emojis on her baby announcement were now distant memories conveniently unavailable. Her ex, Brent, who had whispered promises against her skin and kissed her belly the night she told him about the baby, had vanished like a coward into thin air, blocking her number and walking away with no explanation. No goodbye, just cold silence. With tears clinging to her lashes, she reached for her cracked phone, fingers trembling as she opened a new message, intending to text her only lifeline. Ellie, the childhood friend who had never judged her, never turned away. "I'm sorry to ask," she typed, her pride bruising with every word, "but I need $38 for baby formula. I'll pay you back. I just need my son to eat tonight." She hesitated, reading it over, then hit send before she could overthink it, hoping Ellie wouldn't pity her, just help her. She didn't realize she had sent it to the wrong number. Somewhere on the 40th floor of a glass tower downtown, Elliot Grayson, a blue-eyed billionaire in a Navy suit, leaned back in his leather chair, sorting through digital briefs and stock reports when the message pinged onto his screen. He frowned, expecting a financial report or calendar alert, but his brows furrowed at the words. Raw, desperate, aching with a kind of sincerity that couldn't be faked. He stared at it, lips parted slightly, a chill running down his spine as memories he'd buried long ago clawed their way back. His mother sitting on a kitchen floor, crying over empty cabinets, her hands shaking as she dialed number after number, asking for help and finding only closed doors and voicemails. Elliot had sworn he would never forget how it felt to be powerless, to watch the strongest woman he knew break in silence, and something about the message hit that scar like a strike of lightning. But instead of replying, he closed his phone and opened an app, placing an emergency order for baby supplies. Formula, diapers, wipes, bottles, even a soft blue blanket. Everything he could think of, all expedited for same-night delivery. He kept it anonymous. No note, no explanation, just hope wrapped in cardboard. When Lila opened her door 2 hours later, confused by the knock, she froze. A stack of boxes sat on her front step, a warmth blooming in her chest as she pulled them in with shaking hands, eyes wide as she read the labels and saw the brand new formula inside. She cried, not the quiet, bitter tears she was used to, but the messy, relieved kind, hugging Noah close and whispering to him that angels did exist. She had no idea who sent it. She checked her phone again, realizing her mistake, her stomach sinking in horror as she saw the name. Elliot Grayson. Her heart pounded in her chest. The Elliot Grayson? The billionaire who built Grayson Dynamics from a college dorm? She couldn't believe it. She'd texted the wrong person, but he hadn't mocked her. He hadn't exposed her. He helped her, quietly, like someone who understood too well. Across the city, Elliot stared out his penthouse window, watching the snowflakes fall like memories, his chest heavy but strangely light, as if doing this had lifted something inside him. He didn't know why he cared. He didn't know who she really was. But he knew the desperation in that message had cracked something open, and though he tried to convince himself it was a one-time thing, that he'd done his part and could move on, a part of him, quiet but undeniable, knew this wasn't the end, not even close. The second knock came softly, almost hesitant, like a whisper against the doorframe, but it sent a jolt through Lila's tired body as she clutched Noah closer, her breath catching as if the walls themselves held their breath. She inched toward the door, the apartment dimly lit by the flickering kitchen bulb overhead, her fingers hesitating on the knob. And when she finally opened it, She found not a person, but more boxes, carefully stacked, thoughtfully chosen, and topped with a small ivory envelope sealed with graceful cursive ink. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the note, her eyes scanning the delicate script. Every child deserves to be fed. No need to pay back. E.g., the world spun for a moment, not from fear or confusion, but from the overwhelming rare sensation of feeling seen, of being helped without conditions, without expectations, without judgment. Her knees buckled slightly as she sank onto the cold tile floor, Noah cooing in her arms as tears streamed down her face in grateful silence, the words on the card glowing in her mind like a lantern held in the dark. She reached for her phone, heart pounding, thumbs shaking as she typed a message filled with more emotion than grammar. Whoever you are, thank you. I don't have words. You saved us tonight. And far across the city, inside a sleek penthouse of glass and steel, Elliot Grayson held his phone and stared at her message as if it were a secret written just for him, the weight of her gratitude cracking something open in the fortress he'd built around his heart. He wasn't supposed to respond. He told himself this was a one-time act of kindness, a debt to his past, not a doorway to something more. But his fingers betrayed him, sending a reply with a simple, "You're welcome. You're stronger than you know." That night something began, subtle and slow like the first drop of rain before a storm, as texts turned into conversations, their words threading through the days like a soft melody, neither of them expected to need so badly. They didn't ask for details at first. Anonymity made it easier to be honest, to be raw. Lila didn't tell him her name, only that she had a son, that life had been hard, that she worked double shifts and cried in the shower to muffle the sound. Elliot never said who he was, just that he understood long nights and broken promises, that sometimes loneliness could sit heavier than grief. They began to share more, not names but thoughts, fears, small joys. Lila told him about the time Noah smiled for the first time after a fever, how she danced with him barefoot in the living room even though the rent was overdue. Elliot told her about sleepless nights spent building something no one believed in, about the pressure of always having to appear perfect, even when he felt lost. Their phones became lifelines. Morning check-ins, midnight musings, little jokes that made each other laugh when the world felt unbearable. Lila found herself waiting for his replies like one waits for the sunrise. Quietly, hopefully. Elliot, who had never let anyone in past the suits and boardrooms, began to crave the way her words made him feel human again. She never asked for more help. He never offered again. But the connection deepened, natural and slow, like vines growing toward the same patch of light. Some nights Lila would sit on her sofa, watching Noah sleep, rereading his messages just to remind herself that kindness still existed, that someone out there cared, not about what she looked like or what she lacked, but for the sound of her soul through a screen. And Elliot, with all his wealth and silence, found himself rereading her words during board meetings, smiling to himself when no one was watching, wondering how a stranger had become the most honest part of his day. Then one chilly evening, as snow began to kiss the city skyline, he sent a message that made her heart stop mid-beat. "Can I see you? Just for coffee. No pressure. I'd like to meet the woman whose words have been the best part of my days." Lila stared at the screen for a long time, her fingers frozen, her pulse hammering with a blend of fear and wonder, because part of her wanted to say yes immediately, but another part whispered that reality wasn't as kind as text. Still, her heart whispered louder. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't just survival anymore. Maybe this was the beginning of something real. The bell above the cafe door jingled like a gentle warning as Lila walked in, clutching her coat tighter, nerves dancing beneath her skin as she scanned the softly lit room filled with the warm hum of conversations and the scent of cinnamon lattes. Her fingers tightened around her phone as she replayed his message again and again, heart caught between hope and hesitation. She chose a quiet corner seat by the window, trying to calm the storm inside her, unaware that every breath she took was drawing her closer to a moment that would change her story forever. Then the door opened again, and time seemed to halt. Elliot stepped in, his height commanding, his presence magnetic, with piercing blue eyes that held galaxies of unspoken stories, and a suit tailored to perfection that spoke of boardrooms and brilliance. Lila's breath caught in her throat as recognition bloomed in disbelief, her voice almost a whisper, trembling with awe and confusion as she said, "You're Elliot. Grayson." "The Grayson?" He gave a soft nod, not with arrogance, but with a calm humility that softened his sharp jawline, his smile warm and reassuring, like sunlight slipping through cold blinds. "And you're the bravest woman I've never met." "Until now," he replied, his tone quiet but sincere, eyes searching hers not for answers, but for truth. The moment between them hung like a fragile thread, then settled into something sacred as they sat across from each other. No longer just words on a screen, but two hearts navigating the delicate terrain of honesty. Conversation poured out effortlessly, not rehearsed, not polished, just raw and real. Lila spoke of nights without heat, of hunger swallowed in silence, of Noah's tiny heartbeat that once kept her going when everything else fell apart. She didn't sugarcoat the pain. She spoke of the man who left her for a woman with diamonds but no heart, how he called her a burden, how she once begged him to stay, only to be met with mocking laughter. Elliot didn't interrupt. He listened with a kind of reverence, his fingers wrapped around his coffee cup like it was grounding him from emotion rising too quickly. He shared, too, about building an empire with sleepless nights and shaking hands, about the pressure of being perfect, of being wanted for power, not personhood. His voice cracked when he spoke of his mother, a woman with tired eyes and a heart too big for the world, who once cried herself to sleep in the next room and who never got the help she begged for. Lila reached across the table without thinking, her fingers brushing his, not out of romance, but something deeper. Recognition, the unspoken bond of survivors who'd never stopped fighting. He didn't flinch. Instead, he turned his hand over to hold hers gently, as if to say, "I see you, not your scars." Laughter even found them between the cracks, over terrible baby food flavors and the chaos of parenting hacks gone wrong. Hours passed like minutes, as snow danced gently outside the window, and the world beyond the glass grew darker, quieter. Unaware that inside that cafe, two souls had begun stitching themselves back together. But just as Lila began to believe that maybe this was more than coincidence, maybe fate had given her a chance, her phone buzzed on the table, the name flashing like a ghost from the past. Her heart froze. Jacob, her ex, the man who left her pregnant, humiliated, and broke. She stared at the screen, hands suddenly cold, as Elliot watched her expression shift, concern flickering in his eyes. "Everything okay?" he asked gently, his thumb still resting over her knuckles. She forced a smile, shaky and uncertain, and nodded, but inside her stomach twisted. She hadn't heard from Jacob in over a year. Why now? Why today? And what did he want? Elliot didn't press, sensing her retreat, but a quiet unease settled in the space between them. As they stood to leave, he walked her to her car, the snow crunching beneath their feet, the silence heavy with unsaid things. He touched her door, pausing before she got in. "You don't have to be alone anymore, Lila," he said, his voice low, a promise wrapped in warmth. She met his eyes, the blue of them, shining under the street lamp, and nodded, whispering, "I'm not sure what this is, but I don't want it to end." He smiled, and for a second, it felt like the world had paused just for them. But deep in the shadows of the city, someone else was watching. Someone who knew her name, her past, and the child she tried to protect. And they weren't done with her yet. The evening air was thick with tension as Elliot and Lila stepped into the grand ballroom, the glittering chandeliers casting fractured light over the polished marble floors, and the murmurs of the city's elite swirling around them like a restless tide. Lila's heart hammered fiercely against her ribs, partly from the unfamiliar world she'd found herself in, partly from the shadow that loomed over them. Charles Grayson, Elliot's estranged father, whose return to the company had shaken the foundation of Elliot's carefully built life. Charles's reputation preceded him, a man whose charm barely concealed the web of secrets he spun, including the darkest one that threatened to unravel everything. Sabrina, Elliot's ex-fiancée, the woman who had broken his heart with betrayal, now resurfacing in the same circles with a venomous smile and a new engagement to none other than Brady Carson. Lila's own tormentor, the man who had abandoned her when she needed him most. As they mingled, the room buzzed with sideways glances and whispered suspicions, but nothing prepared Lila for the moment she caught Sabrina's eyes across the room. Wide with shock and icy fury, the recognition was immediate, primal, a silent clash of old wounds and new alliances. Sabrina's gaze slid to Brady, her voice barely audible, a venomous hiss carried only to him. "Isn't that your kid with her?" She nodded toward baby Noah, swaddled quietly in Lila's arms, innocence unaware of the tempest swirling around him. Brady's smirk was a blade wrapped in silk, cold and calculating as he whispered back, "Maybe, maybe not." The words hung like poison in the air, slicing through the fragile calm. Lila's eyes flickered with a storm of emotions, fear, anger, shame. But Elliot's steady hand closed over hers, anchoring her in the chaos. His voice was firm, resolute, a beacon in the dark. "Whatever it is, you're not alone anymore." Yet beneath the surface, the weight of past betrayals pressed down, the ghosts of family fractures and fractured trust creeping closer. Charles Grayson's manipulations whispered through the gala's glittering halls, a reminder that blood ties were often the strongest chains. Elliot's gaze hardened, a protective fire igniting as he sensed the growing threat to everything he'd vowed to protect. Lila, Noah, their fragile hope. Lila fought back tears, the whispers slicing at her confidence like shards of glass. But Elliot's presence was a shield, a promise that they would weather this storm together. Behind polite smiles and elegant gowns, alliances shifted, and the night's glamour masked a battlefield of whispered threats and unspoken plans. Lila's mind raced. How much did Elliot know? Could he protect her from the past that still clawed at their present? Sabrina's cold stare lingered, a silent warning that this battle was only just beginning. Brady's cruel charm was a dark cloud ready to unleash a storm of humiliation and pain. Yet in Elliot's blue eyes, Lila found a spark of hope, a future untainted by past betrayals. As the night deepened, the murmurs grew louder, shadows lengthened, and the path ahead promised pain, heartbreak, and the relentless pursuit of truth. They were no longer two strangers connected by a mistaken text. They were partners facing a legacy of lies and a future they would have to fight for with every breath. The night wrapped the estate in a tender quiet, a gentle hush broken only by the soft patter of rain, kissing the rose bushes that framed the wide balcony where Lila stood. Her figure enveloped in the warmth of Elliot's cashmere coat, the fabric a stark contrast to the chill that still lingered in her soul from the day's revelations. The city lights shimmered in the distance like scattered stars, but it was the peaceful solitude here, under the vast expanse of a midnight sky, that allowed her to breathe, to feel the rawness of hope and fear intertwined in a delicate dance. Elliot stepped beside her, his presence steady yet silent, a silent strength that spoke louder than any words could. She finally broke the stillness, her voice a fragile whisper, heavy with the weight of past wounds and the fragile threads of newfound trust. "I used to believe love was just pain in disguise, something you gave too much of, only to be left empty and aching." She glanced up, her eyes shimmering with vulnerability. "But then I met you, and suddenly love felt like maybe it was something different, something worth risking everything for." Elliot's gaze softened, his blue eyes reflecting the moonlight in something deeper. Recognition, understanding, and an unspoken promise. He reached out, gently tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingertips lingering as if trying to erase the shadows she carried. "You saved me before I ever knew I needed saving," he murmured, the words carrying the weight of his own battles and scars, a confession hidden beneath the surface for far too long. There was no rush between them, no desperate need to fill the silence. Instead, the quiet was charged with unspoken emotions, a sacred space where hearts could begin to heal, where hope dared to bloom amid the ruins. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, the world outside ceased to exist. No past betrayals, no looming threats, just two souls cautiously reaching toward the possibility of something beautiful. Without breaking the fragile calm, Elliot took her hand, his touch firm yet gentle, guiding it to rest over the steady beat of his heart, a silent vow etched in the rhythm they shared. "Whatever happens next," he said softly, "I want to protect you. Both of you." The weight of those words settled around them like a shield, a promise of safety in a world that had been anything but kind. Lila's voice trembled as she whispered back, her heart pounding with both fear and hope. "And if I fall for you?" A tender smile curved Elliot's lips, warmth flooding his eyes as he whispered with absolute certainty, "Then I'll catch you." The night deepened, cloaking them in a gentle embrace, the quiet between them now filled with a tender promise of healing and love waiting to be written. No grand declarations or sweeping gestures, just two hearts learning to trust again, finding solace in the soft confession of a night that held the fragile beginnings of forever. When Brady filed for custody of Noah, accusing Lila of being an unfit mother, claiming she was jobless, living off a stranger's wealth, and unable to provide a stable home, it felt like a dagger plunged straight through her heart. The coldness in his words wasn't just legal jargon. It was a deliberate attempt to destroy her, to erase her from her son's life. Elliot's world exploded in fury. How could Brady, who had abandoned Noah the moment he found out about the pregnancy, suddenly claim the right to raise the child? "He didn't even want Noah," Elliot roared behind closed doors, his voice shaking with rage. "This is revenge. Pure, bitter revenge." He paced relentlessly, fists clenched, feeling the old wounds of betrayal open wider as he imagined the legal battle ahead. But the cruelty didn't end there. Sabrina, his ex-fiancée, who had once shattered his heart with betrayal, played her part in the twisted game. She leaked private messages exchanged between Lila and Elliot to the press, carefully selecting words to paint a poisonous picture. The media seized the scandal, twisting it into a narrative where Lila was a gold digger, a woman who manipulated Elliot for money and status. Overnight, Lila's name became a headline, a topic of whispers and judgment. The invasion was suffocating. Cameras appeared at her apartment, reporters lurked outside the daycare, and social media trolls spewed cruelty under the veil of anonymity. Lila, exhausted and terrified, retreated into herself. Alone in the dim light of her tiny bedroom, she cradled Noah, her tears falling silently as she whispered, "Maybe I should disappear. Maybe I'm just ruining everything." The shame and despair pressed down on her like a weight too heavy to bear. She felt the crushing loneliness of a mother fighting a battle not just for her child, but for her dignity and worth. Yet in the darkest moment, Elliot's presence was unwavering. He knelt before her, tears mingling with the rain streaks on his face, a silent vow shining in his blue eyes. "You are the only truth in my world of lies," he said, voice breaking but strong, "and I will fight for you. Every step, every breath, every moment." His hands held hers tightly, grounding her, reminding her she was not alone. That night, their bond deepened. No longer just two broken souls seeking solace, but partners in a fight against cruelty and injustice. As they prepared to face the cold, merciless courtroom, fear gnawed at their courage, but love forged a shield around them. The halls echoed with whispered judgments, but they answered with unwavering resolve. Every accusation hurled at Lila was met with Elliot's fierce defense, every lie confronted by their united truth. And as they stood before the judge, their intertwined hands spoke louder than words, a testament to the family they had built against all odds. The legal battle was exhausting, full of painful cross-examinations and cold stares, but beneath it all grew a fierce hope. Lila learned to trust Elliot's strength, and he, in turn, was inspired by her unyielding love for Noah. Together, they navigated the storm, braving heartbreak and betrayal, weaving a tapestry of resilience and faith. Though the world had tried to break them, their love remained unshaken, a beacon of light shining through the darkest nights. And in the quiet moments, when the courtroom was behind them and only the soft breathing of Noah filled the room, they found healing in each other's arms, knowing that no matter what storms came, they would face them side by side. This was more than a fight for custody. It was a battle for redemption, trust, and a future where love triumphed over hate. And as the days blurred into nights and the struggle continued, one thing became clear. The cruelest betrayals could not sever the bonds forged in the fire of truth and hope. The courtroom felt suffocating as Lila stood before the judge, her heart pounding like a drum in a silent symphony of fear, hope, and exhaustion. She clutched the small hand of baby Noah, who looked back at her with wide, innocent eyes, unaware of the storm raging around them. Every word she spoke was a fragile thread, woven from the deepest places of her soul. How she had raised Noah alone after the man who promised forever vanished without a trace. How she had battled sleepless nights and empty cupboards. How she had sacrificed everything for the tiny life that depended on her. Her voice cracked, her tears spilled, yet she held on, telling the truth that love wasn't measured by money or status, but by sacrifice and unwavering devotion. The spectators listened in silence, some with sympathy, others with skepticism, as she bared her heart and soul in front of a courtroom that seemed ready to judge her as unfit, undeserving, and insignificant. Then came the moment everyone feared and anticipated, the DNA test results. The judge's voice echoed, cold and official. The test confirms that Brady Carson is not the biological father of Noah. A collective gasp escaped the courtroom like a sudden storm, rippling through every soul present. Lila's knees nearly buckled, disbelief clouding her vision. Was this a mistake? How could this be true? She looked to Brady, whose face, once smug and confident, had drained of color, eyes darting nervously. The whispers began immediately, sharp and poisonous, as onlookers speculated about the child's true paternity and Lila's story. But before the speculation could spiral out of control, Elliot's lawyer stood, steady and commanding attention. Your Honor, we requested a secondary test, one that was imperative due to suspicion of error in the initial results. The results are conclusive. Noah's biological father matches Mr. Elliot Grayson's DNA. The room froze. The air thickened as the words hung in the balance, shaking the foundations of everyone's beliefs. Elliot's blue eyes widened, stunned into silence, his mind racing to process the impossible truth. No, that's not possible. I never. His voice faltered, disbelief and confusion mixing in his tone. Lila's lips parted, breath hitching, as she whispered a question that had haunted her since she met Elliot. You had a brother, didn't you? The courtroom seemed to hold its breath as Elliot nodded slowly, his voice barely audible, as he revealed a secret buried deep for years. Yes, Evan, my twin brother. He died years ago, but there's more. I briefly dated a woman years ago. Someone who could be Noah's mother. The revelation stunned everyone. None more than Lila, who now realized that the man she had connected with through texts, the man whose kindness had rekindled her hope, was not Noah's biological father, but his brother had been. 1,000 emotions crashed inside her: shock, confusion, sorrow, and a strange sense of relief that the child she loved was tied to this family by blood, despite the tangled history. She looked into Elliot's eyes and saw not the distance of a stranger, but the warmth of a man willing to stand by her, to protect what was theirs together. For the first time since the nightmare began, hope glimmered. The judge, eyes steady, called for calm and ordered a recess, allowing the legal teams to regroup and the emotional storm to settle. Outside the courtroom, whispers erupted like wildfire. News reporters scrambled to capture every word, photographers snapped relentless flashes, and the city buzzed with scandal and intrigue. Yet amid the chaos, Elliot and Lila found a fragile solace in each other's presence, their fingers intertwined, grounding them in the truth they had uncovered. The revelation rippled far beyond the courtroom walls. Charles Grayson, Elliot's estranged father, watched from the sidelines, his expression unreadable, but his mind racing. Sabrina, Lila's former rival and now fiancée of Brady, seethed with fury, realizing her carefully crafted web of lies was unraveling. Brady himself was pale, his arrogance shattered by the undeniable proof that Noah was not his son. Meanwhile, Lila wrestled with the emotional whirlwind inside her. She had fought so hard, endured betrayal and pain, only to discover the man she had texted and the man who was the father of her child were not the same. But Elliot's unwavering support gave her strength, a promise that no matter the tangled past, they would face the future together. Over the following days, the news spread like wildfire. Headlines screaming about the shocking twist in the custody battle, about the mysterious millionaire who had unknowingly been texting a woman with his late brother's child. Lila's phone buzzed constantly, with messages of support and judgment alike. Yet she held on to the moments when Elliot's hand found hers in public, when his voice was soft and reassuring, reminding her that family wasn't always defined by blood alone, but by love and loyalty. Together, they navigated the storm, legal battles, media scrutiny, and the lingering pain of past betrayals. But with every challenge, their bond grew stronger. Elliot stepped into a role he never expected, not just as a potential father to Noah, but as Lila's protector, confidant, and partner. Late at night, in the quiet of his estate, they talked endlessly about the future, about how to build a life free from the shadows of the past, about creating a home where Noah could grow safe and loved. Elliot confessed his regrets, the guilt he carried over his brother's death, and the pain of knowing that fate had woven their lives together in such a complicated way. Lila shared her fears of losing Noah again, of trusting someone with her fragile heart, but each confession only deepened their connection. One evening, as rain fell softly against the windows, Elliot pulled Lila close, his voice steady with determination. "Whatever happens, I'm here. For you, for Noah. We'll fight this together." Lila smiled through tears, feeling the walls around her heart begin to crumble. The fight wasn't over, far from it, but for the first time, she felt she wasn't alone. The courtroom revelation had shifted everything, but it also opened the door to a future neither had dared to imagine. A future where love was no longer a distant hope, but a promise waiting to be fulfilled. And as they stood united, ready to face whatever storms lay ahead, they knew one thing for certain. Fate had brought them together for a reason, and together they could overcome anything.